Today we'll be taking apart the Lenovo 100E Chromebook. During this repair, we will actually just do a full teardown. Nothing will actually be replaced. I will show you how to remove the LCD as if you were doing an LCD replacement, as well as everything underneath inside the lower casing. So let's go ahead and get started. The main thing that we'll talk about today will be organization. We definitely want to make sure that we're staying organized. The tool that we'll be using will be a screwdriver, Phillips screwdriver, a isosimo, and a pair of tweezers. This magnet pad will be used to organize the screws. I recommend every step is one square. However, you are more than welcome to organize however you would like. We'll go ahead and get started up with the repair of the Chromebook. So the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is take out all 10 screws on the lower casing to remove the back plastic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10. From here, what we can do is take our isosimo and kind of just get in between the seam right here and pop the device open. Once the device is popped open, it should separate pretty easily. If you feel any resistance, usually that means you forgot a screw. So if you don't count 10 screws up here, then you should probably go back through and see where you missed one. So the first step of the Chromebook repair, once you have the lower casing removed, will be to unplug the battery. That should always be your first step. You don't want any power going through the battery as you're working on it. So you can just grab the wiring and then kind of just pull back. It should come out pretty easy. So from here, what we'll go ahead and end up doing is unplugging everything from the motherboard. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 cables that we'll be unhooking. These cables, you need to flip the connector up and then pull it straight back. Once you have all the cables disconnected from the motherboard, you can go ahead and take the battery completely out. To remove the battery, we'll go ahead and pull this up. There is adhesive on the bottom of the connector that holds it down to the battery. So we'll want to make sure that we pick this up and not just try and pull the battery out. There are 4 screws that hold the battery in. We'll go ahead and undo those now. Once you have all 4 screws out, lift this cable up, the battery should just come right out. There should be, once again, no resistance on that. And then we can go ahead and set the battery aside. The next step will be to remove the daughterboard, which is right here. There are 4 screws that hold this in, and then there's also a little metal bracket right here. This does separate from the daughterboard. So what we'll go ahead and do is undo these 3 screws. I will recommend just leaving the bracket with the daughterboard. As you'll see, that's what I will do. So these connectors are usually held down by adhesive, and this one is as well, as you can see. So you will feel a little bit of resistance as you pull that up. Once you have that, you can just pull it out. So the next step will be to remove the Wi-Fi card. The Wi-Fi card is right here. It's held down by one screw and it actually is connected to the motherboard. So the next step will be removing the speakers. There are 4 screws that hold the speakers in, 2 on each speaker. 1, 2, 1, 2. Something that's pretty important is the cabling. No matter what you're doing in a Chromebook, the cabling, or any laptop, or any repair is cabling. You always want to make sure that you kind of look at the way that the cabling is routed, just to make sure that you get that back. You don't want to cause any fires or the device to just overheat and melt the plastic. All right, once you have those 4 screws out, the speakers do just come straight up. You just want to make sure that you get it out of these valleys and little clips of plastic. So just go ahead and de-wire all the way, and then once you have that, you'll have both out. Now, the last thing that we'll remove, the second last thing that we'll remove is the motherboard from the lower casing. So there are 7 screws, 8 screws that hold the motherboard in. Once again, there is another metal bracket right here. This does separate from the motherboard as well. But once again, I will recommend that you keep that just with the motherboard. So once you have all of those screws unscrewed, you can just lift the board up, and you'll want to take it out at a 45-degree angle. Also, whenever you're putting it back in, you'll want to put it in at a 45-degree angle. Right here, you can see there's a little hole, and right here there's a little peg, and same for up here. So whenever you go to put this on, it'll kind of just like hook around, and then it doesn't go, the peg does not go through the motherboard here, but it does down here, and so it kind of just rotates in. So once you have that, you can go ahead and set the motherboard down, and you also have the bracket. All right, from here, this is the last thing that we'll take out of the lower casing, which will be the trackpad. There are a few screws that hold the trackpad in. As you can see, just these 3 right here. So we can undo these 3, and then there is also a clip, which I will show you, that holds the trackpad in as well. You do have to push a little bit harder to get the trackpad out. See, there is a little metal clip on the right hand side of it. You kind of just push that down and it'll go through that, just like that. From here we can go ahead and remove the upper clam from the keyboard bezel. And to do so, all we have to do is de-wire these 2 cables. So it'll be the Wi-Fi antennas and the LCD cable. Once you de-wire that, there are 6 screws that hold the hinges in. So 1, 2, 3 on the right side, 1, 2, 3 on the left side. Whenever you're putting this back together, you just want to make sure that you put the screws in the ports that have the arrows. So once you have this undone, what you'll do is kind of just pop it up like that, and then the keyboard should just fall down and out. Then we can go ahead and set the keyboard aside. For the LCD in the upper clam, to remove this LCD bezel, you'll actually normally have to take out screws. On this specific device, you do not. There are no screws holding this LCD bezel in. So we can actually just take our pry tool and get in between the seam and kind of just pop it up. Once you have it up a little bit, you can kind of just get your fingers in between and pop it off. And you can set that aside. So from here, what we will do is remove the LCD. There are 4 screws that hold the LCD in. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we'll just go ahead and unscrew those. Okay, so now we can actually just pop the LCD panel up. What we want to do is just make sure that it gets detangled from the little clips of plastic down here, and then we'll flip it over. And just like most LCDs, from here we can actually go ahead and just pull this tape tab up, flip the metal bar back, and once that metal bar is back, the LCD just unplugs. And then we can set that aside. So the last part would be a hinge replacement. Both sides are pretty similar. There are 5 screws on each side that hold the hinges in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 4 on the bottom, 1 up top. We're gonna go ahead and do the left-hand side, the LCD cable side. The other side is pretty repetitive, so we're only gonna show you one side. So if you were going to replace this hinge, you would just pop it out and then pop your new one in. So now we'll say we're going to replace an LCD cable. From here, what you want to do is just untangle it, dewire it from the tape and then the plastic clips going all along the edge. It does come out pretty easy. Putting it back in is kind of tough. So from here, what we'll do is take the camera out, and this is just held down by adhesive. If you have to, you can always use your iSesmo. And from here, we would just unplug this. So say if you were gonna replace the camera, you wouldn't have to take this out. You could just pop the camera up and then unplug it, put the new camera, plug the new camera in, and then put it back down. So from here, you have done an entire teardown of a Lenovo Chromebook 100E. So now we'll start the reassembly. So from here, what we'll go ahead and do is just start putting it back together. And put the camera in first. So we'll plug the connector back in. And once you have the wiring done, you can put your hinge back in. From here, we can go ahead and put our LCD back on. So what we'll do is just grab our LCD, flip it over, grab the cabling, plug it in. And you want to make sure that that metal bar goes back down before you put the tape over it. And then we'll just push the tape down, and the LCD should just set right back in place. And as you can see, I made a little bit of a mistake. And just like that. So from here, what we can do is just make sure that your cabling goes back correctly. And now from here, what we'll do is put the 4 screws back in the LCD to hold it in place. From here, we can go ahead and put the LCD bezel back on. Before you put the LCD bezel back on, you just want to go back through. So say you replace these Wi-Fi antennas, what you want to do is just make sure that all the cabling is sitting down properly, and just take a second look at it and make sure nothing is going to get pinched. Once you realize that everything is good, you can go ahead and put your LCD bezel back on. Just like that. And then you can push it down all the way around. And you just want to make sure everything is flush. From here, we can go ahead and grab our keyboard and flip it over. And just put that in place, and then pull the hinges back. If this lines up correctly, there should be 2 little plastic prongs that go through, 2 holes on each side. From here, we can go ahead and put our hinge screws back in. And like I stated previously, you'll just want to make sure that you put these in the correct slots where the arrows are. If you do accidentally put a screw in up here, then you'll notice whenever you go to put this plastic backing on that there will be a screw in one of the holes that it's supposed to go through. From here, we'll go ahead and put our trackpad back in. Go. Once the trackpad clips in, it should stay, so it shouldn't fall out. Then you can go ahead and put your 3 screws back in. From here, we will just go ahead and make sure that our cabling gets put back. Just like that. From here, what we can do is go ahead and put our motherboard back in. As I stated earlier, there's just that plastic prong right here that you want to kind of set it on first, just like that, and then it kind of just rotates in, and you want to be holding that at like a 30-degree angle, and then once it sets down, it'll just set, and you have your metal bracket that will go ahead and set down as well, just like that. From here, we can go ahead and put all of our screws back in. What you'll do is, just like up here where it has the arrows, you'll put the screws back in where the arrows are. And then right here, this one is for a 500E only, and it does tell you that. So you'll just make sure that you don't put a screw there. From here, we can put our Daughterboard back in. Separate that. And this has some clips that it needs to go around as well, the little prongs right here and right here. So when you put it in, you just put it in at a 30-degree angle as well. And that metal prong should go through that hole, plastic prong through this hole. Once those aligned, then you can put this metal bracket back on. And from here, we can go ahead and start putting our Daughterboard back in. From here, we can go ahead and take our speakers and put these back in. And what you'll want to do is make sure that you're getting that wiring correctly and weaving it back and forth in between these clips and valleys of plastic. There will be a little bit of slack left over here, and it does kind of just loop around. And these will just sit over that. We can go ahead and put our 4 screws back in. From here, we can go ahead and put our Wi-Fi card back in. This will just lay flat and then push in. And there's one screw that holds the Wi-Fi card in. Whenever you're reconnecting the antennas, as you can see on here, there are 2 arrows. The white one, the white cable goes to, the black arrow, the black cable goes to. So you can just go ahead and put those back on now. Now we can go ahead and plug all of our cabling back in, except this cable. So from here, we can plug this back in as well, the LCD cable. From here, we'll go ahead and plug our battery back in. Well, we won't plug it in, we'll just place it back in. There are a couple of prongs that it does go over, and those will sit in place as well. Now we can go ahead and take our screws and plug these in. Now we'll go ahead and plug this cable in, and remember this just sits right up on top of the battery. Now, before you go ahead and plug the battery in, you just want to make sure you look over everything, make sure everything is plugged in before you do so, and all of your cabling is correct, and it's rewired up here. Whenever you're taking the device apart, if you have bad memory or something along those lines, you might not be able to remember where these cables go. You can always use your smartphone to take a picture you can reference later on in the repair whenever you're rewiring everything. So once you realize that all of the cabling looks good, you can go ahead and plug your Chromebook back in. From here, we can place the lower casing back on. And put our 10 screws back in. Once you have finished that last screw, you have successfully done a complete teardown of a Chromebook Lenovo 100E.